So let's start. One of the best evidences we have, again, to determine the truthfulness of evolution is the fossil record. Now, what does each model predict about the fossil record? Well, the evolution model predicts that we should have many, many intermediates, transitional forms all the way up through the fossil record. Transitional forms, creatures that are slowly evolving into some other creature. We should find many, many transitions. But the Bible, the creation model, clearly predicts and states there should be no intermediates. We should find genetic variability. For instance, dogs. We have many flavors of dogs, but they're dogs. Many types of people, shapes and sizes, but we're all people. So the two models have a very different prediction. Well, let's start here. What I've had pictured up here is a whole geologic history of this Earth based on the evolution model. This is our geologic time scale. And according to the evolutionist model, we should find creatures all up and down this geologic column here. We should find the simplest on the bottom, and we should see a gradual progression all the way up, going from very simple single-cell organisms all the way up to creatures we have living today. Gradual progression. Many, many intermediates, many transitional forms. Remember the National Academy of Sciences said we should find so many we can't tell where one starts and the other one leads off. Now, is that true? Well, let's go all the way down to the bottom of this geologic timescale. All the way down to the Precambrian and Cambrian eras. Now, the Precambrian, according to evolutionists, occurred about 650 to 544 million years ago. Then the Cambrian period existed for about 544 to about 505 million years ago. That's based on the evolutionist timescale. Now, during this time, in the Precambrian, we have all these single-celled organisms. If evolution is true, we should find many, many transitions leading up to the Cambrian. Because in the Cambrian, we find very complex creatures like jellyfish and trilobites and creatures like that. We should find these transitions. Well, let's see. First of all, the Cambrian explosion, which is called biology's Big Bang, is the sudden appearance of many complex creatures. Notice that word, sudden appearance. This entire period this transition lasted between 5 and 10 million years. And during that time, in the Cambrian period, every major body plan suddenly appears. And these body plans, these designs, still exist today. In other words, we go from single-celled organisms all the way up to very complex creatures with no transitions. Now, if evolution is true, they must be able to produce the evidence. Because if they can't, that means their whole foundation of the fossil record is false. And if the foundation is not there, we don't even need to go anywhere else. Because that means their entire model is now based on faith, not science. Now, this chart here, based on the evolution model, we're going to compare evidence against evolution here. On the left-hand side, I have a time scale. On the bottom, I have morphology, the shape. Now, if Darwinian model is true, we should start from a single cell and gradually produce this tree going up to the Cambrian era. We should have this many, many transitions going all the way up to give us all these major body plans we have in existence today. This is if evolution is true. If Darwinian evolution is true, we should find these intermediates from single cell going all the way up to the Cambrian. But in fact, this is what we actually observe. Again, every major body plan, complex creatures suddenly showing up in the fossil record with no transitions. Sudden appearance of complex creatures. That clearly supports created after their kind. Now, at this point, we don't really need to go any further in the fossil record. We will. We're going to continue. But from an argumentative point of view, from a discussion point of view, this is where evolution ends. They have no foundation for what they're teaching. If there's no foundation, why should I accept the evolution model when they can't produce the evidence? I already have a faith. Why should I accept your faith? You see, that's what we need to be doing here. The evolution model clearly shows they have to have faith here. They have no foundation. Let's see what the scientists have to say. David Berlinski writes in his book, A Tour of the Calculus. Now, he's an evolutionist, says this: there is no question that such gaps exist. A big gap appears at the beginning of the Cambrian explosion over 500 million years ago, when the great numbers of new species, get this, suddenly appeared in the fossil record. Ariel Roth, PhD in zoology, in his book Origins, writes this: the Cambrian explosion is not just a case of all the major animal phyla appearing at about the same place in the geologic column. It is also a situation of no ancestors to suggest how they might have evolved. In other words, where are the thousands and thousands and thousands of observable intermediate or transitional forms? See, this is the foundation of evolution again. If they can't produce the observable evidence, why should we accept evolution? I already have a faith. Why should I accept another faith called evolution when you can't supply the evidence? Now here's a book, textbook, Biology, Miller and Devine, 2002. They state this: the Cambrian period, which begins 544 million years ago, is marked by an abundance of different fossils. Why the difference from earlier periods? And they state, by the Cambrian period, some animals had evolved shells, skeletons, and other hard body parts. Folks, you go through this book, you will not see one transition form to support this model. What they have done in this textbook is made a great claim without producing any real evidence. That is called faith. And we are allowing faith, a religious faith called evolution, to be taught in this country, in our public schools, in a science classroom. So what do the facts support? At this area, the foundation, the facts support all creatures were created after their kind, because no one has been able to find the thousands and thousands and thousands of intermediates that should be out there between the Precambrian and the Cambrian.
Darwinian evolutionists have tried to get a number of different fossils classified as transitional fossils, but none have stood the test of time. The most famous fossil to be initially claimed to be a transitional fossil is Archaeopteryx. It was claimed to be an intermediate form between reptiles and birds. But after studying this fossil, most authorities have classified it as a true bird.
In Darwin's time, there was not a single example of anything that has come to be known as a missing link. In fact, it was not until almost the time of his death that a fossil bird was discovered in Bavaria, I believe. It was named Archaeopteryx. That was, for all intents and purposes, intermediate between reptiles and birds. That was a triumph of his hypothesis.
Archaeopteryx, classified today by many paleontologists as a true bird, not a reptile-bird intermediary, was the first of a number of deceptive schemes promoting evolutionary ideas. Evolutionists misdated and misidentified this extinct bird, presuming it to be the missing link between reptiles and birds.
The best example of a transitional form that my evolutionary friends usually give is Archaeopteryx, a supposed link between the reptiles and the birds. Recently, another bird has been found, dated by evolutionists, to be 75 million years older than Archaeopteryx. So therefore, Archaeopteryx could certainly not be the ancestor of the birds. Actually, evolutionists don't have any idea how the reptiles evolved into birds. They don't have any of these transitional forms. But that doesn't stop them. You pick up any book on evolution, and Archaeopteryx is still presented as the best evidence.
However, when you look at what Archaeopteryx really was, it was certainly not a feathered dinosaur. We have Alan Fiducia, who is a world-class expert. He's written this enormous book called The Origin and Evolution of Birds, encyclopedic treatment of fossil birds. But he said that paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into an earthbound feathered dinosaur, but it's not. It's a bird, a perching bird, and no amount of paleobabble is going to change that.
Up to now, the discussion has been more about the conflict of ideas, possibilities, and beliefs. But the fossil record provides us with the only historical documentation of what actually did happen in the past. By studying the fossil record, you are looking at the actual history of life on Earth. Based on this, the fossil record should be considered the ultimate authority on the question of origin of life. Everything else we have discussed is just theoretical and meaningless if it can be shown in the fossil record that life started abruptly and didn't change. When I read such statements as, "No real evolutionist uses the fossil record as evidence in favor of evolution," it indicates to me that evolutionists would rather ignore the most direct evidence we have concerning the origin of life and use their pseudoscience to try to convince us that Darwinian evolution is true. Evolutionists realize what should be their strongest favorable evidence is actually devastating to their theory. As you can ascertain, the fossil record is critical to understanding the real origin of life. So I've made this a two-part video, the second part in 1 week. They deliberately ignore this fact that by the word of God heavens existed long ago and the earth formed out of water. 2 Peter 3:5.